Well, that's one of the things I had to learn, is what is the role? That's my big question. I'll speak often about the sacred role of the healer. It's a sacred role for me. So if it's my role to be here with a client and to say what I see or say what I know, but oftentimes, especially if you're with your relatives, that is not my role. Okay, so it's like I'm just not going there, and you just yes, of course, I sense it, I see it, and some of you maybe listening see it, or you sense something, and you want to fix it. That's the rescuer role. That is not the healer role. And so I get really clear with myself. And again, I don't go out of alignment with spirit. I stay in my alignment no matter where I walk, but I don't always say what I see or sense. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And it really is. I love that word alignment also. The Book of Hopi by Frank Waters. I think some of the Hopis didn't really like that he put everything from interviewing, their leaders, but it's an amazing book. And they talk about being in the blueprint. That we're to live our lives in the blueprint, in the spiritual blueprint. I think we have our own blueprint or alignment, our own codes, if we want to use quantum ideas too. And I think we're held within the universe in a certain alignment or blueprint. And mine might be different than yours versus Honey the dog, who's sleeping quietly over there. He's always good. He's very old. But when we're not doing our everyday lives in alignment, that's we're not going to be serving ourselves either, or showing up, with love or grace or sometimes strength and power. I don't think it's always about love with the sense that many people, meditate on it. Like it's not all you know, pink swirls. Sometimes it's about boldness. Sometimes, it's about saying the right thing. A few years ago, I was walking the inner city with my now ex-husband. He had just become an inner city pastor. And I had myself and three or four men with me, and we walked into this alley. Stupid thing to do, by the way. And there's these two young men fighting with broken Coca-Cola bottles. I mean, they're gouging each other, they're bleeding. And I stood there, the men backed up. I stood there and I just said, how am I to be with this? And I was seized with this sense of fire or boldness, that sort of like a holy fire. And what came out of my mouth, but what would your mothers think? They stopped. I wouldn't have come up with that with my head, but obviously in that moment there was something I was to do and say, and I could not, have written myself a script card for what would work with those battling, probably on drugs, young men.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I love that when, and I'm sure many of are listening or can get that when all of a sudden something comes out of your mouth and you're like, wow, I wonder who thought that. Like, like that was pretty good, or something that just that's when I know I'm in alignment and things, even if it's tough, even if it's something that is they need to hear, but maybe it's not as nicely as we like to speak and polite in a way. I mean, sometimes it's that very direct thing that shakes the energy field that opens and shifts something. And that's
Exactly. With a client, with ourselves, sometimes it is sort of like bows and twinkles,
mhm.
right? Sometimes that's what's needed is that kind, compassionate, how have we not been treated? How is a client or a loved one, or a friend never been treated? But sometimes it's sort of like maybe there's a little bit of manipulation going on there. You certainly are well trained, I'm sure, to spot what sometimes in therapy are called victim issues or entitlement issues. Or, I love feeling sorry for myself every once in a while, but it doesn't really work. It doesn't get me anywhere.
Mhm.
I have an exercise I learned in a 12-step program. I was in many 12-step programs, including adult children. And years and years ago, one of the attendees said, here's what I do when I want to feel sorry for myself, or I want to just be in a funk or whatever. I pick up a rock and I make sure it's a heavy rock. And then I carry it around for an allotted amount of time, like an hour. And as long as I'm carrying the rock and in that allotted amount of time, I just get to be in self pity, or I just get to be kind of resentful, or I just get, and there's no bad feeling, but you can't do this for days, right? And then at the end of the hour, set down the rock and just get on with it. So I think it's often, there's often a need to self discipline,
Mhm.
and sometimes we have to share those sort of notes too. I think with clients, like, you can work on the issues. I help people a lot using my intuition, go into their heart space, dig down, process the feelings, look at what might be creating causes. Is it interference? Is it what they went through? Is it past life stuff? Is it this or that or the other thing? But sometimes I end up saying, you just don't buy the 12 donuts and bring them in the house and you won't eat them. So, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we have to be practical.